just to get us started. I want to invite you as we kind of get together and start today to just introduce yourselves in the chat and share something that you like to do in your free time in the chat. And I'll say I'm Amy Dalsimer. I'm one of the facilitators of the clinic, and in my free time, I really love to take long walks with my dog. It's okay, Maureen, if your video doesn't work. We love for you guys to be on video if you can be, and if you feel comfortable with that. Ariana, thanks for sharing that you like to dance. Rimu, reading, excellent. I'm sure you're in good company here. So welcome and thank you guys again for joining. Please go ahead and continue to introduce yourself and share something you like to do in your free time. Oh, I can see we have some animal lovers in the group. You're in good company. Our CalPro team we're big animal lovers. You'll probably hear about them over the next few months and maybe even see some pictures as part of the training. So thank you all. And as you're looking at folks introducing themselves, go ahead and make sure that you know who's on your who's here from your team, who's joining you from your agency. Some of you may have worked together before. Some of you may be working together for the first time. All right. So with that, welcome again. I'm Amy Dalsimer. I am a CalPro IET subject matter expert, and I work with the American Institutes for Research. I've been facilitating and working with the IET Implementation Clinic and training California adult educators in IET for the past 7 years. It's really my most favorite part of my job. And before joining AIR as a professional development facilitator, I was the program director of a very large adult education program in New York City at LaGuardia Community College. And there I had the opportunity to design and implement and run several IET programs. And I can honestly say that it was the best work I've done in adult education. And I've been working in adult education for almost 40 years now. So I'm really excited to be here to share with you what we've learned about IET, and also just from my own personal experience as an IET leader at a large community college in a large adult ed program. And I'm going to turn it over to Sudi and Adria now to introduce themselves.
Hi friends, I'm Sudi Whalen. I am a Senior Technical Assistance Consultant at AIR and I'm CalPro's Senior Training Advisor. I've been with CalPro for 9 years, where before that I taught at Liberty Adult Education Center in Brentwood, California. California is my adult education home, although I moved to Virginia in 2021 to be closer to my mom. But you guys are my people, so I'm so happy to be here. I taught CTE at Liberty Adult Ed and implemented integration into our programming way back when, before IET was cool, is what I like to say. We're kind of like IET OGs, I feel like, Amy, if we can say that. And so I'll pass it over to Adria.
Thanks, Sudi and Amy both. So I'm Adria Katka, and I'm delighted also to be able to be part of this clinic and coordinating and supporting this clinic. My adult ed background is in ESL and digital literacy primarily, and this led me to a co-teaching assignment quite a number of years ago in an IBEST course. IBEST is the IET model in my home state of Washington. And so that gave me the opportunity to serve as the ESL and basic skills instructor in what was for us our IT IBEST pathway. So that included electronics and programming courses. And those are not my background, but I always say with anything, I did have that kind of digital literacy background. And I always say with digital literacy things, you don't have to be sort of a tech expert as long as you're not tech fearful. And I'm not fearful. So to be able to be involved with things like digital literacy and IET and, all of those kind of more innovative, I guess, kind of programs has always been it's just great and invigorating. I've loved teaching in this model for a lot of reasons, and also being able to, serve as a coach for things like IET design camps, and now in my role at AIR, to support something like IET implementation clinics. So again, really happy to be part of this group, and welcome.
Thank you, Adria. And we also have Maria Carrasco here. Maria is our tech support and our all-around support for the clinic. And so if you need anything, there she is, she's waving. Post a message in the chat if you need anything tech related or any support at all. And Maria's here to help us all out. So our goals for today, this is are really our kickoff and our orientation. So our goals for today are really to share with you kind of the purpose of this clinic, how it's going to work, the calendar, the expectations, the format of the training, and then to begin to introduce some of the key elements of IET program design and the planning considerations. So this is really just the beginning of a much larger conversation we're going to have over the next several months. And most importantly, we want to launch our community of practitioners and our IET community of practice here, since we will be together as a cohort for many months. So you guys have already shared your agency. So what I'd like to ask you to do now is just to share in the chat your proposed role in the IET program. Are you the ESL or adult ed teacher? Are you the CTE teacher? Are you a coordinator? Some of you have other members on your team, program directors or career transition or career counselors or advisors. So if you could just go ahead and share with us your proposed role in the program and one question that you have about implementing IET as we get started. What's top of mind for you? Thank you, Mr. Farrow. I'm gonna not say everybody's names right, and you're gonna have to correct me, but thank you. That's a great question. How does this truly benefit students? I see we have some ESL teachers. Farrow, wonderful, thank you. CTE teachers, great. How are other agencies implementing IET, right, Ariana? That's like question top of mind, right? Which is how are other people doing this? What does it look like? And we are going to be sharing a lot of that. Great. I see the question about maximizing payment points and enrollment. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. These are great questions as we begin the clinic. Some of these questions may be addressed today. Many of them will be addressed over the coming weeks. And we're going to keep track of these questions also to make sure that we elevate them as we go along with the training over the next few months. All right, thank you all. So first, we just want to sort of see where you guys are and ask you to take a quick poll. Where are you in the IET implementation process? So a poll should pop up in front of you. So we're still in the planning phase. We have everything in place and we're getting started. We're piloting, or we have one program securely in place already. I'm going to give you guys a minute to complete that poll. We have almost all of you participated. Just one or two of you left to hit that submit button. Okay, we're going to share the results now. So it looks like this is a really diverse group. So almost half of you have at least one program in place, which is great because that means you can share with everybody what you've done, what works, what isn't working, kind of talk about what you've learned and how you do it. Some of you are, about a quarter of you are in the midst of piloting your first program, and about a third of you are still in the planning phase or have everything in place and are just beginning to get started. So wherever you are is the right place to be. You've come to the right place. The clinic is both about sharing amongst our experiences amongst one another, and then also, helping people who are really just at the beginning of the IET journey. So we did ask you some application questions, and I just want to share that. Um, how would you rate your expertise in designing and implementing an IET program? And a lot of you feel like you're just starting at the beginning. Some of you feel like you have more IET experience or expertise, and then a few of you said you're advanced. So again, that's great. We are going to be drawing on all of your experience and knowledge, as well as all the questions you have if you're just starting with your IET design. We asked you also what were some of your goals for the training, and many of you are really looking to get that foundational understanding of IET. What is it? What do I need to consider? How do I plan for it? About a third of you are very interested in digging more into curriculum and design and instructional strategies. And then a bunch of you are really interested in kind of how does it work? Like what's the scheduling look like, and how do we do the integration, right, of the component parts of the IET? So the good news is this training really addresses all that in a deep way over the weeks and months that we're working together. You also indicated some topics of choice, and we will be covering these in depth in the clinic. So exploring the co-teaching and alternating teaching models. Why, what are these things? Why and how do we choose them and use them? Building an integrated syllabus, and then developing a team partnership, right? And we focus a lot on that because IET is definitely one of the most collaborative models that we have in adult education. So the format for our training, and many of you, I think, have this information from your application, but I just want to be clear that we have the format of the training is that we have some online shorter webinars like today. Then we have two almost day-long virtual training sessions. Don't worry, there's a nice lunch break and a lot of stretch breaks, but we find that it's helpful if people can focus and really dedicate some good chunk of time to the professional development. We have an online community of practice group. That's the Moodle that many of you may have already joined, and that's a virtual space that you'll hear more about, a chance for you to get your assignments, find all the training materials, but most importantly, share and ask each other questions and have a space for continuing the conversation between trainings. Another big piece of the IET clinic is we do ask your team, your agency team, to complete a capstone project. That's a slide. It would be a slideshow presentation that you will give on the last day of our training. And don't worry, we walk you through that whole process, and we'll give you more information about preparing for that capstone process in our sessions forward. And then we have coaching, which starts at the very end of our training and continues on. So the clinic coaching, you'll be assigned a coach who will help you implement your IET action plan, which is part of your capstone project, and to address your challenges along the way. So, thoughtful planning is key, but when you get to the actual implementation, all kinds of things come up, as you all know, and having a coach there to be a resource, answer questions, help you through challenges that are happening on the ground. You'll have monthly check-ins with them via email or phone between January and September, and then they'll help be quarterly hour-long coaching sessions like via Zoom or Teams or whatever form you use, so your team can really dig in. You have this, but I just want to draw your attention to it. This is our schedule of trainings. I know that we're all super busy, so please make sure you have these dates and times on your calendar now. If you need us to send this to you again, we will. Just put a shout out in the chat. And on this calendar, you'll see that there are some team assignments due. So there was nothing due for today, but when we meet again on Friday, October 24th, you will have some homework that we will be asking you to bring. All right, so with all the kind of logistics out of the way, let's pivot and really start talking about, let's start from the beginning, focus on kind of what IET is and look at some of the key elements in program design today. And we really want to start at the beginning so that we all kind of have shared concepts and a shared understanding of what IET is. So building on the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act definition of IET, which is obviously the funding, the legislation that provides our funding and our guidance, federal guidance around IET. The California Department of Education definition of IET is this. IET is a service delivery model that provides adult education activities concurrently and contextually within workforce preparation activities and workforce training. Concurrent and contextually means that within the overall scope of the IELCE program, adult education, workforce preparation, and workforce training activities must be of sufficient intensity and quality and based on the most rigorous research available, use occupationally relevant instructional materials, that's that contextual part, and occur simultaneously. And that's that concurrent part of the definition. In a nutshell, IET is really an educational model that combines career technical education or occupational training with adult education, ESL instruction, and workforce preparation. And it expedites the educational and career advancement of our students. And it does this really by providing those services concurrently and using contextualized literacy as the form of the English language or literacy and basic skills instruction. So somebody asked when we started, like, how does this program really help students? So you queued me up for this one, which is, why do we do IET, right? And essentially, IET accelerates student progress, right? Historically, in education, and adult education, and even in community colleges, students have had to complete their basic skills, right? Their English language acquisition and earn their high school equivalency diploma before they could go on, right, for post-secondary credentialing or their courses in a community college context. It might be courses in their major, right, those technical courses or those major courses. And then they would, right, be able to start that vocational training or those credit classes or the college program. There's a lot of problems with that traditional sequential model of education for our adult learners. The first is that the length of time that it takes for our students, right? Time is the enemy for our students, not because they're not hardworking and devoted and goal-oriented, but because we all know that our students are often one flat tire away, as they say, from stopping out, right? Like things happen. Our students are busy people, right? They have job changes, they have families to take care of. And the longer it takes for somebody to complete a sequence of education and training, the less likely they'll do that, even if they're incredibly committed and hardworking at it. So there's also, as we know, oftentimes a gap between the highest levels of our adult basic ed or ESL classes and our high school equivalency classes and what is needed to move into some of these credentialing programs, these occupational training programs, or entry requirements for a degree, right? So that gap also oftentimes means students have to do more work to get into those programs. There's low rates of persistence and transition between a traditional adult ed and post-secondary ed or post-secondary credentialing. And there's also inadequate and uncoordinated support services. And you guys, I know this well, that, oftentimes our students fall in the gaps, our adult learners, right? Like, so moving from our adult ed programs to a degree program, they fall in the gap, right? And it's mainly because we either have different institutions or even different departments within the same institution, and we're not as coordinated around helping students make those transitions. And finally, maybe the biggest issue or one of the bigger issues is that there can be big differences in our pedagogy and our curriculum. ESL classes can look very different than occupational skills training classes, right? And we're going to talk about that a lot. But for students, that can be sort of a big change and disruptive, right? So IET really seeks to address all these challenges by, again, contextualizing, integrating, and offering concurrent, simultaneous instruction. And we know that IET works because there was a big study done on the largest IET program in the country, which comes out of Washington State, where Adria worked. And basically, and they in Washington State, they call their IET iBest. And basically, it's implemented in across all their community colleges. So they had a huge pool of folks that they could follow longitudinally to see, did this IET model work? And essentially what they found is that adult ed students enrolled in Washington's iBest program were more likely than others to earn credits, right? So they had a credit bearing IETs that count towards their college degree, like moving them along those momentum points. They were more likely to earn that post-secondary credential, that occupational credential, and most importantly, they made greater gains on their basic skills tests like CASAS and TABE. So there's research that really shows this model works. So what is IET? Like, there's a lot that goes into IET, and we're going to be breaking down many component parts of designing a robust IET. But at the heart of IET are the three required components of IET. And thank you, Maria just posted the handout for you guys in the chat that you can open up to look at or save onto your desktop. Essentially, at the heart of IET are these three required components, right? That integrated instruction is organized around that single set of learning objectives that some of you may have already been working on or heard about, right, as part of your IET design work, and an integrated curriculum that incorporates these three elements. The first is very familiar to many of you. That's the basic skills component, or the adult ed, the reading, writing, listening, speaking, and sometimes even the math component. The second is that workforce training. That's the classic kind of career technical training. Many of you are probably doing or thinking about doing different things, some healthcare trainings, some hospitality, culinary arts, welding. There's hundreds of different types of trainings that practitioners in California are doing, and you will hear some about that. And the third component are these workforce preparation or employability skills, those kind of soft skills, right, that are required in the workplace. Things like teamwork, digital literacy, critical thinking. And the key to designing an integrated program and an integrated curriculum is incorporating these components and delivering them simultaneously rather than sequentially and contextually. So I've kind of talked about this a little bit, but just to dig in a little bit, the basic skills component are the ones that, if you're working on the adult ed side, are really familiar to you, right? Reading, writing, speaking, listening, English language, acquisition activities. Your program may have math. Some programs have math. Some of you may be doing this for ELLs, and some of you may be designing programs that are high school completion programs, even, or thinking about that. There are programs that are the ASE IET models. The second part is that workforce training, or the CTE, that I talked about. Those are kind of the traditional career technical programs. But I want to point out that some of those programs, a lot of times we think, oh, it's got to be like career training like we offer in our school or in our college. But a lot of times the workforce training component can be an online training, or it could even be on the job or an incumbent worker training. So some IET models we see are for uh, programs that are partnering with an employer who has a need within their workforce to upskill those students, right, on the job, or to take workers who are working, let's say, as home health aides, and trying to upskill them for CNA or phlebotomy because the employer has that need, right? And then our adult ed and our providers, our training providers, are working with those employers to design an IET, but on the job. There's a lot of different types of IET models. So I know we kind of default to thinking oh, what do we offer on at our school or at our campus, right? And that's a big common way to do it, but there's all these other creative ways, especially if you think about what's available online. I see your question, Mr. Farrow, and we will answer it either in the chat or as we move ahead. Thanks for asking. Workforce prep is that third required component. As I said, these sometimes they get called soft skills, but there's really nothing soft about them, as you guys know, right? These are the skills that regardless of what sector you're in, healthcare, education, IT, every employer says they require and need from their employees, right? Like working with others, right? That digital literacy component, right? The ability to manage oneself. We oftentimes call these employability skills, and we're going to share with you guys the link. Oh, thank you, Maria. Maria just put the employability skills framework in the link. And we find this really helpful when you're thinking about what are those workforce preparation skills. And we're going to go back to this framework in the training forward, but we wanted to share it with you now because there is often some confusion about what's the difference between workforce prep and workforce training. And so we find the employability skills framework really helps to kind of identify what are those global skills, those employability skills everybody needs. But to help clarify kind of some of that, what's an industry recognized credential, what is the workforce training component versus what is workforce prep, California Department of Ed produced this IET at a glance guide to kind of help folks tease out, is a first aid course, is that workforce training or is that workforce prep? Is a digital literacy course like a Microsoft Suite course or a basics course, is that workforce training or workforce prep? And there is understandably overlap, right? So Maria just shared the CDE at a glance document, and I want to strongly suggest that you download that and make sure you're familiar with it as we go ahead. This is guidance from the California Department of Ed, and so and then we certainly can talk to you more about it, but I think it really does help to clarify some of that, that gray area between those two required components. So just to kind of wrap up, those are the three required components. So as we move ahead in this training, you want to make sure when you're thinking about your program design, your curriculum design, your integrated syllabus, your single set of learning objectives, that these three required components are evident. And we're going to do a lot of work to help you develop that and develop the tools for your IET program around these required components. The last thing I just want to mention before I turn it over to Sudi is the designing quality IET programs and the IET quality indicators. So while the three required components that I just talked about comprise kind of the service delivery model, the quality indicators are a set of features that any IET program should really aspire to have. And we just shared them in the chat. Thanks again, Maria. Maria just shared those. We're going to be going back to these again and again over the weeks ahead in the training. Because like I said, this is kind of aspirational. Like when you think about your IET program design and you think about what you need to do to design a robust and quality program, the 24 IET quality indicators really should be like a guide stone for you. And, we're not suggesting that everybody needs to do all of these right away. This is definitely a tool for continuous improvement over time, those 24 indicators. So as IET program and classroom leaders, you can use them to assess any existing IET programs you have or the plans you've made. You can use them to design new programs. You can use them to to identify priority areas for improvement over time. And you can develop action plans, right, based around these indicators. Like, oh, we don't have this feature in our IET program, but we want to work that in over the next 6 months. So essentially, they're organized into 5 categories, and we're not going to go over the 24 indicators. As I said, they're going to be part of the training as we go. But the big categories are IET program design, which is really about intentional and unified design and the development of a program, one that meets your local labor market needs, right? Fills a need in your region or in your community for jobs that exist or pathways that need to be developed, and that they provide pathway to quality jobs for our students, and that they also align with all the federal and state policies, right? The second is about collaboration and industry engagement. IET is it's a collaborative model, and you really need to be working with employers and industry, as well as kind of a variety of service providers and educational providers within your community and your institution, your agency, or your school. And so these quality indicators are about, what you need to do to kind of build that robust program and have a unified vision. The third one is all about curriculum and instruction, and designing that single set of learning objectives, incorporating the use of technology, and responding to industry needs through the curriculum instruction. The fourth is student experience and progress, which is really about the provision of wraparound support, right? So how are we supporting students to completion? And when we say completion, we mean not just completion of the program, but entry into the new job, right? How are our programs designed to move them into that new line of work? And then finally, the last one is really about program management, staffing, and organization. Um, you know, you IET requires us to work in a different way. And so we will be talking about how you organize your team, how you provide support and resources for your teachers who are doing this new work and need to be supported in that endeavor. And so, as I said, we'll be looking at these 24 indicators as we go. We just wanted to introduce them here today as kind of a seminal document for the training. And I am going to turn it over to Sudi now, who's going to get us started on some of your initial planning considerations around your IET program.
Thank you, Amy. Before we move on real quick, since I do actually have an extra minute here, I'm going to circle back to the question that was in the chat. I did provide an answer in there, but keep in mind, most CT programs tend to be competency-based, and we're going to talk later on about how we're aligning our CTE standards with our other basic skills and literacy standards so that you can keep that competency-based instruction going. IET is really all about that program mastery. We want students to get the industry recognized credential. We want them to get the job. And so we don't want to take away from that competency-based approach and in order to integrate IET. And so that's why that contextualization and integration is really important so that you don't lose that piece. I'm really glad you raised that question. Thank you. So I want to take some time now to walk through what this could look like in practice, some considerations and questions to ask yourself, along with some examples. So let's go ahead and move forward. So when we're really thinking about this, before you jump in, you need to do some extensive planning. If you've already implemented some programs, but if you're looking to strengthen them, you also want to continue programming and planning around those things. So some things to consider is which career pathway you want to select, what IET model you're going to be using, who you need to get involved, and how to start the curriculum planning process. We consider the first three questions a little bit in this section, in this session, and we're going to talk more about them in coming sessions. But that third question, curriculum planning, will be the focus of several of our sessions as we talk more about this today. So as you think about getting started and setting the stage for IET implementation, it's critical to think about who is on your team and how to build that team collaboration. Integrated instruction and successfully implementing an IET model requires new types of partnerships and new ways of working between departments, whether that's your career tech ed and ESL or ABE, et cetera. And then also having most times two separate instructors from two different departments working together in totally new environments, right? So to set the stage for successful collaboration, there are a few processes and steps administrators and IET staff can take. First is to identify and hire leaders that are enthusiastic and experienced coordinators, advisors, and teachers who could collaborate, experiment, try things out, and be committed to moving students across the goal line together. The next one is to set expectations for co-planning and collaboration up front and make sure that is ongoing. IET planning is not a one and done. You don't develop it the one time. You're like, okay, we've got a curriculum, go teach it, and you're done. You need to be triaging that and adjusting it, especially while you're piloting it, to make sure you're doing the best that you can for your students, that you're hitting all those competencies you want to make sure you're hitting, and the standards you want to make sure you're hitting. Now, once you've piloted it and you've gotten it really strong and you have a strong, robust program, now you're ready to move on to piloting the next, right? But when you're in that first initial pilot phase, you want to make sure that you set these up ongoing meetings up front, so you have regular check-in points. And don't forget the importance of the water cooler conversation. If you have something that come up with a student and you pass each other in the hall, to stop and share that information as well. Just keeping each other updated in real time. Communication is huge. Visit each other's classes. The two teachers cannot operate independently. They have to work interdependently for IET to be successful. So they need to know if students are attending, making progress, etc. during the programming time, but they also need to know what's it like in your program. Oftentimes with IET, we'll see an ESL teacher go and visit the CTE classroom so they can get a better handle on the textbooks and what's going on in the classroom and the experience. As a CTE teacher who sat in the back of an ESL classroom on more than one occasion, I'm telling you there is benefit to doing that, because you start to identify areas in which you can reinforce language learning in your CTE classroom just by picking up some habits that you see ESL teachers doing. So for example, and Adria does this all the time, even in virtual settings, because she's an ESL teacher, is like just remembering to point to the thing you're talking about and using language and realia and body language to be clearer about what you're talking about. That's not something I, as a CTE teacher, ever thought about doing until I sat in the back of an ESL classroom. I was like, oh, that's so simple, but could really help my students who are English language learners really understand. So visit each other's classrooms. And the other is scheduling, share planning time, use professional learning community meetings if you have them, informal meetings, email, just keeping each other up to date. And again, that's stop at the water cooler or quick pour your cup of coffee. Hey, so-and-so is absent today. Do you know what's going on? Those little touch points are really helpful. So by creating these processes and expectations, teachers will be able to develop and implement single sets of learning objectives and lesson plans and integrated syllabi that meet the students' needs and help them succeed within the training. So let's do a little bit of chat here. First up, I want to know, how did you select your pathway or the training for your IET program? And what were your planning considerations? We are actually 2 minutes ahead, which has never happened to us here before. So if you would like to unmute and share, please feel free to do so. But what path, how did you select your pathway? What were your considerations? I think about half of us have IET programs, so there should be some interesting answers. And I see a few of you are making the I'm looking at my keyboard and typing face, so
I can share.
go ahead.
I wasn't in on the selection process, but I think one of the main thing was career oh, what was I just gonna say? The industry. We looking at different industries and the need.
So labor market
Yeah,
information.
labor market. Yes, yes,
Got
yes.
it, got it. Thank you, Jacqueline. Let's see. Laurel said they developed their IET pathway for an instructional assistant class based on the hiring needs of their school district. Love that. Perfect pathway into direct work. Mitch said industry needs within our area and consortium discussions. Great. Thank you. So that's Napa and Roland. Anyone else want to share? Amy, I see you unmuted.
Connor has a comment too. They have CNA medical interpreter and
Oh,
office assistant.
I'm sorry, Connor. I have this tiny little chat window and I did not see that. You have those two programs. Those were the first two were in place before you joined. We're due to instructor availability and local job needs. Got it. And you've heard they're interested in other pathways but can't find instructors for them. Got it. And what's interesting, oh, Kathy said students were surveyed, also great. And what's interesting is sometimes we end up setting up IET programs based on who's available or what existing program we have, and sometimes that's successful. And sometimes we do that, and it turns out who's available and what we already have in place is not meeting the demand, and we're not getting people hired. So it's good when you're looking at local needs and who's available and who's hiring all together, so you can make sure you're planning for the best. Um, Mr. Farrow said, Graciela told me we had all the building blocks, so I'm here to learn. Program already integrated with our ESL. Okay, the ag tech program. That's cool. I think it's the first ag tech program I remember seeing in here. So that's very cool. I love new pathways. That's fun. Okay, so let's, when we're thinking about these things, all the things that we would probably consider, you've mentioned, what's in demand on the job market, where are the opportunities, what are students interested in, that's that student survey. Are there pathways with barriers to ESL or ESL students? For example, is them being a language learner, is that going to be a problem? Do they need to be a higher level of ESL or have mastered the language? Who are your partners? And whenever we think about partners, we oftentimes are thinking about who else within our consortium and within our agency and our school and our program, but also think about your employer partners, community-based organizations that can provide wraparound support services, those type of things. And then also, do the partners and teachers involved have not only the commitment, but also the interest in actually running in these programs? So really great responses, and you guys touched on a lot of the things that we would have mentioned. So you mentioned most of these already, but some other things to think about, in addition to what are the students asking for, is it also an in-demand growth occupation? If both those things are true, that's awesome. Does the first credential fit into a career pathway so students can continue on? So for example, they go from CNA to LPN to RN and so on, just making sure that they can continue to stack and move further down the career pathway. Remember, IET is typically the beginning of the career pathway. You're not expected to offer the entire career pathway, but you want to get them started onto that pathway, right? You also want to take into consideration how long is the training, something that can be completed in a relatively short period of time. It's, for example, 3 to 8 months would be typical for IET. And then will they be able to go into their work field on that first rung on the ladder, making a reasonable wage? Is the workload for the class itself and the program itself going to be a barrier for the student? So you want to think about the intensity and the schedule. You want to make sure your program is rigorous and comprehensive and it covers everything it needs to cover, but also that it's doable for our adult learners who oftentimes have families and children and other jobs. So you want to make sure you're keeping that balanced. And you also want to think about who your partners will be, especially if you're looking to another school or organization for CTE. Not everybody offers CTE in-house. I understand that. And so you want to make sure you're partnering with someone else who does offer that. Is there a good partner that's interested in the collaboration? Oftentimes you can tap into that within your consortium. And then you always want to start looking at data on in-demand jobs in your area in order to understand what the industry need is, because of course you want your students to get hired when they complete your program. Of course, we always want the payment points for students completing, but we also want to get those payment points for students getting placed in jobs. So, extra points, extra money, beneficial for everybody. So taking a look at some labor market information, these are predicted to be California's long-term fastest growing jobs within the next, between now or 2023 and 2035, right? So one of the things that's important for you to know is how this compares to the local information in your area. Do these jobs, are they similar to what you see? Do you know what your fastest growing occupations are in your region? You don't have to answer that question right now. For homework, this is going to be something that you're doing as an activity and an assignment to identify the fastest growing jobs and then coming back and sharing what those are and how it aligns with your IET programming. Now, keep in mind, just because something is the fastest growing job in the state doesn't mean it'll be the fastest growing job in your area. So for example, lodging managers might be number 10. That's in the top 10 jobs, right? But if I am out in the middle of the desert, I might not have a lot of people that want to come lodge with me unless they're going to Palm Springs. You see what I'm saying? So you want to make sure it's reasonable. All right, so this slide is annotated. We're going to do a quick or animated, I should say. But I want to make sure we point out a couple of things. There's all kinds of really cool activities, not regions, but all kinds of different industry sectors and things like that that you're going to come across as you're looking at the 10 fastest growing jobs. And you might be like me and you might see something that looks really cool and get really excited. You might be like, oh my gosh, we could do food service, hospitality, a little bit of HVAC. We have a person to teach pharmacy tech. We could do that too. Don't do that. Don't try to do all of them at the same time because what you end up doing is having to constantly fix and correct and adjust, and that becomes really stressful and things fall through the cracks. Instead, start with one. You're going to identify a bunch of cool pathways, but if you haven't got IET going yet, pick one industry sector, one pathway to start with. Pilot that really well because in that first pilot of IET, one of the things you're doing is figuring out that program specifically and what students need for that program, but you're also figuring out your own processes. How do we work best together? What does our meeting cadence need to be? What other supports do we need? Where are students struggling outside of education? Is it childcare, transportation, housing insecurity, food insecurity? How can we support those things? So it really helps you in that pilot time to get together not just your curriculum and instruction pieces, but also your support services and how you're orienting students and all of that great stuff. So you want to make sure you get that done really well with that first one. And then a lot of those processes will be replicated subsequently with your other pathways. And then you only have to focus on the curriculum and instruction with those, if that makes sense. So as we looked earlier at key elements in building collaborative partnerships, to do this, it helps to have a shared vision. That shared vision means everybody needs to agree on why we're doing this. We're doing this because we want students to get life-sustaining wage jobs. We want them to succeed. Although we love having them in our classrooms, we don't want them to stay with us forever, right? Write us, tell us how you're doing, but go get the good job and be great, right? We also need to have adequate planning time. That means set aside time at monthly meetings for academic and CTE teachers to share data and progress. Informal time when you're on the same campus and can just stop and talk to each other. Teachers visiting each other's classroom. Again, that's really, really, really helpful before you set up a program to just visit each other's classes, get a vibe for one another, how you teach, how you engage, and also what things students might struggle on and pick up best practices. If anything, you're going to become even more awesome versions of your already awesome selves just by working together. Then also set aside upfront and ongoing curriculum planning time and integrated lessons. I know I keep saying that. There's a reason I keep saying that. It's really, really important that you do that. You're also going to want to focus on student outcomes. What are the sticky points for students? Where do they really need more support? In my CT classrooms, it was oftentimes not the practical activities that students had a hard time with. It was oftentimes the reading and math components of the industry exams that they struggled with. So that's where we knew we needed extra support. And then share successes with all of your partners and interested parties, whether that's faculty, board members, advisory committees, employers, etc. Curriculum planning, we'll talk a lot more about it another time, but that's an important thing to set aside time for. So now remember earlier I said an important thing for you to decide on is which model you will use. So let's talk about those models. One of the things that you think about is how do we want to teach this? Now I want to make sure that everybody understands that all IET teaching is team teaching because it requires you to be a team and work together, even if you're not teaching in the same classroom at the same time. So when you hear us talking about team teaching in IET, we're just talking about the team that works together. When we talk about the models, we're going to use the phrase co-teaching, that's same classroom at least some of the time, or alternating. So for alternating teaching, that's when students are enrolled in two different but coordinated courses. In this model, an ESL teacher and a CTE teacher are teaching in two different classrooms and students attend two different courses at different times. So that's alternating teaching. Now with co-teaching in this model, both the ESL and literacy teacher and a CTE teacher are teaching in the same classroom and students are co-enrolled in the ESL and literacy and CTE courses at least some of the time. Now, what we oftentimes see is a hybrid of both of these things where you have some co-teaching time, but then also some alternating teaching time where you're not always together. So when we think about some of these types of things, there's going to be pros and cons for each one of these things. So when we think about alternating teaching, there's more flexible scheduling, more attention to individual student needs, but within alternating teaching, instruction tends to be less integrated because teachers aren't there to support and triage each other in real time. So you want to be really intentional if you're using alternating teaching 100% of the time to make sure those educators are checking in with each other regularly on an ongoing basis so that it doesn't become less integrated and that you're doing that shared instructional planning time. Now, with co-teaching, teachers need to know and trust each other to work in the same classroom. There can be turf issues going on there, so you want to make sure you're front-loading that collaboration time and getting to know each other time. But students also get the benefit of learning from both teachers simultaneously and also seeing that integrated support and teamwork demonstrated in real time, which there's a lot of literature about why that is a strong benefit for students. So when you think about these two models, for those of you who already have programs, and even those of you who don't, which model are you implementing or thinking about implementing, and why did you choose that model? What's been going on in the chat? Um, I see a question from Mr. Farrow about, is it okay? Was that Mr. Farrow? Where did that come
I
from?
addressed it, Sudie.
Yeah, that's actually, CASAS won't actually give you a weigh in on that specifically. Like the payment points and how to chart that, yes, but whether or not you can do CTE in English or Spanish, you can. There's no, California does not have any rules against it. The thing is, for your Spanish speaking classes, does it have the ESL component to it? And that's the component that Amy's telling you. You want to talk to CASAS about how to adequately chart that. Because if you're doing it in Spanish and there's not a language learning component, that wouldn't be 243. I think that would be more 231 ABE. So definitely ask that question with them, but just know that there's no rules against teaching anything in English and Spanish, but how you count it for IET would be different. So let's see, going into what we're doing. Laurel said alternating, Jacqueline, and I don't, is it Jacqueline, or Jocelyn? I just make sure I'm pronouncing your name right.
Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, okay. Then Jacqueline is doing co-teaching. Connor said alternating. Remu's doing alternating. Kathy's doing co-teaching. Nieves is doing alternating. Mitch co-teaching. And Nieves says, is it possible to have one teacher with both credentials? Girl, yes, it indeed is. Do you have a unicorn, Nieves? I'm just, wow. That is very rare, but it is actually possible. If you happen to have one teacher that happens to have both credentials and the skills to teach both, you absolutely can have one teacher teaching both components. But we call that the unicorn model because it is so rare. But that was a very good question. So when we think about the focus of instruction in IET, each instructor's focuses on different things and have different areas of expertise. But strong IET models offer integrated, contextualized, and coordinated instruction. So an example of the CTE teacher in nursing that does a lesson on patient care protocols this week, and then an ESL teacher teaches and practices specific vocabulary and sequence of procedural steps with students ahead of that to prepare them for what's coming up on the protocols, right? And so they just kind of support each other. But when we think about what we do, CTE teachers are going to focus on that technical content, the requirements of the pathway. That's where your competencies, those essential standards and skills they have to pass a certification exam come from. We're gonna outline the duties and tasks required to function in that job, and then of course teach necessary abilities and skills to be successful in the pathway. Whereas our ESL literacy instructor is going to develop language and literacy skills and basic skills that are relevant and contextualized to the pathway. This could be reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And as Amy mentioned earlier, also math. ESL math is becoming even more popular, especially with IET being utilized and math being a common sticking point in industry certification exams. There's going to be a scaffolding of the content, and the ESL teacher is going to do that, like the example I just gave, where they front load vocabulary and sequencing of procedures for the student, and then the following week they're learning the protocols that front loading was relevant to. And then, of course, the ESL and literacy teacher is also going to provide opportunities for students to practice those basic skills in context. So earlier I gave an example of in the chat when they were asking about competency-based and HVAC program might, in terms of reinforcing language skills and reading comprehension skills, might use an actual textbook that goes with their HVAC program and that kind of thing to help them not only learn the reading comprehension skill, but you learn it in context. So they're also learning the CTE content at the same time, if that makes sense. So before we move on, are there any questions about co-teaching versus alternating teaching? You can unmute and ask if you would like. And I'm going to expand so I can see more of you. Let me check the chat. Yes, Connor, you will get access to these slide decks and a recording and the handout. Okay, awesome. And then Amy's enthusiasm at the end. Thank you, Amy. All right, so if there's no questions, I'm going to keep us moving. So how does this actually work on the ground? One of the hardest questions is often how do we schedule IET and these multiple training and education components? All IET models and schedules are different and will be determined largely in part by the training requirements, as well as teacher and student availability. But we're going to show you how some of these schedules might work. So this is what a daytime schedule with a partial co-teaching model might look like. As you can see, there are times when the teachers are in the CTE class together and when the students are in the class just with the CTE instructor. That's on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And in the contextualized basic literacy class with the adult education instructor on Thursday afternoons. What I like about this schedule is that critical ongoing weekly time for teachers to plan and collaborate is built into the schedule that you see here on the screen. Also, time is set aside for monthly IET team meetings. That might include other critical members of the programming team, such as a career navigator, advisor, leadership administrator, or employer, if you wanted to get employer input on anything going on within the curriculum. Putting this regular planning time on the schedule and allocating resources for it sets the stage for collaboration and integrated communication throughout. So this is what an alternating teaching evening class might look like while the two instructors are in different classes. And in this model, there are also weekly scheduled teacher planning meetings included here as well. So you see that they have the CT classes happening in the evening, but then they have their adult ed ABE class happening earlier in the week, and it's contextualized. And an afternoon alternating teaching class might look like this. So if you're using a co-teaching model, this might look different. And some IET programs also run on Saturdays or weekend schedules to accommodate students, especially busy working students who can't come during the day, or they might have kids in school, etc. Sometimes those weekend classes really are the best fit for our students. I know for me, evening classes and late night classes seem to be the ones that were the sweet spot for our students because they did work. And one of the things that was really beneficial with our one of our programming, our accounting programs, was that our accounting teacher actually had a full-time accounting job during the day. So the time that we needed to have students in the classroom actually worked for who we hired for accounting because it matched when she was actually available to teach. So you want to make sure you find that sweet spot between what are the students' needs and when are they actually available, and then also when are the teachers available that can actually teach this, or is there someone that you can hire that can work at specific times? Go ahead, Ariana.
Hi, can you go to the previous slide, please?
Yes, I can. We are going to, you will have access to these slides in the recording. Is it this one?
Thanks. Yes, that one. So I'm completely new to all of this. So I'm barely learning vocabulary, everything.
Great.
Like for example, when I first heard of IET, the example was of a CNA program where they had an ESL teacher helping out. But now when I saw this slide, I'm thinking of like an electrician program where
Mm-hmm.
the students have low math skills.
Yeah.
And instead of needing language skills, they would need basic math skills. So
Mm-hmm.
would the contextualized AE class, could that be like a foundational math class?
It could be. The thing to think about right now in California is currently your IET payment points are connected to ESL. Now, if you all went to CDE's sessions at CCAE in the spring, or if you went to the Cape Summit what was that, last week? They did talk about new policy coming out around ABE, and that's not expected until the summer. So there may be new policy around payment points for ABE coming around, but so yes, in this example, if the student needed math support for electrician or welding or whatever, that contextualized adult ed class could be mathematics, it could be reading and literacy, it could be anything. But think about for your WIOA Section 243 funding, IELCE is specifically connected to English language and civics education, right? So it will be connected more to your ABE payment points if you're doing math, unless you're doing ESL math, and that's how you connect it to your 243.
Got it. Thank you so much.
No problem. That was a really good question. Ariana's keeping me on my toes. All right, so I'm going to pause and see if anybody has questions as we line down. I also want to tap into the hive mind of collective wisdom and ask for those of you who experience IET providers to share a little information also. What has been your greatest challenge when you first implemented IET? For those of you who've already gotten started, what was your biggest challenge? And I'll add the secondary question. What solutions have you found to those challenges, if any? And feel free to unmute and share. Kathy, I see you unmuted. Did you want to share?
Yeah, I think
Good.
probably the greatest challenge is to decide how to contextualize the course using the most appropriate strategies. And working with the classes and working with the teachers, I think that that's coming to fruition by actually going through the process and trial and error and working to see what are the deficits that the students may have based on the benchmarks and that they should have reached so that they could take this course. So it's informing and informing us in terms of what kinds of things need to be strengthened on the ESL side,
Yes.
and kind of like shoring that up so that the transition and the journey for the student could be easier. But that is, I think, a challenging part, trying to decide how to do that.
Yes. And Kathy, thank you so much for raising that, because that tends to be a challenge. And a lot of times we jump into IET thinking every aspect of the CTE program needs to be contextualized for ESL or ABE. And the bottom line is that's not completely accurate. And exactly what Kathy just mentioned, looking through the data, seeing where students tend to get stuck, where more support is needed, et cetera, is a really great place to start and see what things do we need to focus on contextualizing initially. Now, as you're going on, you might identify other areas of contextualization and language support that's needed, or math support that's needed, et cetera. But looking at that CTE certification exam data as much as you can, or your common formative assessments or summative assessments, et cetera, from the CTE classroom to figure out where do students typically get stuck is really helpful. Your CTE teacher will be able to tell you some of this, but also looking at the data could yield information that the CTE teacher may not have even been tracking at the time. Like they may be like, they have a hard time with reading, but they may not be sure exactly what reading concept they're struggling with, if that makes sense. So diving into the data helps you really unpack that. Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing. Anyone else want to share challenges and solutions or ways you've worked through those? Nita said hiring credentialed CTE staff and selected co-ops that coordinate well with the CTE pathway. Yeah. And remember, you can create your own co-ops. That is always an option to you. So if you feel like the co-op that's there does not quite meet the need, or it's not really challenging the competency that you want it to challenge, or et cetera, you are allowed to create new co-ops. In fact, CASAS encourages that. So definitely lean into what's there as you're creating things, but also think about if it doesn't meet your needs, you can create additional ones for additional pathways that haven't been created yet. Any other challenges or anyone else that wants to?
Classes y todo eso. I can add one
ahead.
challenge, Sudi. I know this is our second time trying to go through this because the biggest challenge for us is aligning curriculum and the curriculum process within a community college to combine our non-credit ESL with our existing CTE programs. There's just not enough people on this campus who understand how to bridge the two. So we have our own ESL program here on the college. We have great CTE programs. How do we bridge them together?
And that's where that collaboration is going to be necessary between that CTE program and your ESL program, so that you can weave that in effectively. Like, think about it this way. If I was a K-12 adult school within your consortium, we would create an articulation agreement so you and I could look at each other's stuff and make sure we're in complete alignment. When you're on the same campus, well, it seems like it would be easier. There's no articulation agreement, and you're just hoping the other person is willing to come work with you and come to the meeting and et cetera. So that's where it's really important to really kind of reinforce that we need to meet, we need to sit down and talk and flesh this out, so I can make sure my students are doing the things that they need to do within your CTE program, so I can front load for you, so I can integrate, so I can scaffold appropriately so students can be successful. Yeah.
And I think it's more of writing of the curriculum to get courses approved so that they can go
That
through.
extra red tape, yeah. And then you
Yes.
also have the whole SLO process,
Yes.
all of that. Yes, I totally understand exactly what you're saying. It's not impossible though, because some of the best IET programs in California, I'm not saying all of them, because we got some really strong ones in K-12 adult schools, are also in community colleges. San Diego Community College District. You see Donna, Donna and some of the videos, that's, you know, the Bed Bath videos and all that kind of stuff. That's at San Diego Community College Continuing Education, right? So we know it can be done. It's just a matter of buckling down, getting everybody to the table, having those recurring meetings, and really massaging it in. But that willingness to do so is really important. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Connor somehow got kicked out. No, Connor's right there. Connor, how are you on here twice? We must be switching devices. Where you got stuck, I'm not sure. All right. So a field trip to other colleges that's doing it well is also a good idea. Yeah, we've had some programs that have been able to do that. And that's also really helpful. And also just scheduling time to meet with and asking questions of folks that were, no worries, Connor. For a second, I thought you were here twice and then you were frozen. Glad you made it back. Okay, so no, I'm frozen. Okay, there we go. So any other questions generally before we move into our wrap up? All right, well, with that, I will pass it over to Adria, who's going to wrap us up and take us home.
Great. Thanks so much, Sudie. And thanks everybody for sticking with us. We have just a little bit more to go. Just some things to help you know what's coming next. So, as we wrap up today's kickoff, I'd like to take a moment just to have us reflect about what we've learned about IET today. And so, okay, there we go. There's our slide. So, let's have one more chat question. I'm just going to ask you to take a moment and think about a takeaway or an aha moment from today's session, or you can think about one thing that maybe sparked some interest for you or something that you is sort of that burning question or that, oh, I need to talk with my team about that. Something that you might like to learn more about. Whatever in that space might inspire you, please share something with us in the chat. I'll give you a little moment to type those items. I'm going to pause and just be quiet for a moment. Not a long time, just a moment. We're seeing great things come up here in the chat, and I'm going to let you continue to go with those, but I feel like it's unfair to ask you to reflect and think and then talk at you. So I'm gonna hold here for another moment, and not even read aloud. I'm just gonna let you think and write. I love getting these captured. And I'm seeing that already. I'm hoping that our session today has really already addressed some of those questions that you had on your way in that we took from, just from your application responses. Things like scheduling and hearing about different models of co-teaching, alternating teaching, et cetera. Sudie just raised for us that whole idea of creating our own co-ops, and Maureen said, oh yeah, let's talk about that. So as you continue, I'm going to let you do that. And as you're continuing to type away, I will also go over some of the assignments that you're going to find in Moodle in a block labeled Assignments 2. So that'll be there down below today's live session in your Moodle. So one of the assignments you'll see listed there is to visit the California Employment Department website and identify the top 8 or 10 local employment projections for your area. You'll see directions for all these things there in Moodle. I just want to talk about them now, but it's all there for you. So no need to worry about taking notes on this bit. You'll also, in that same assignment block, watch an IET components and pathways video lesson. So that'll be there for you. And these tasks will be accompanied by a few questions that will guide your team in beginning the important discussion of what your IET plans will be and why they'll be that way. That bringing in that focus of intention is such an important part of this. So these assignments should be completed by the time of our first full day session, which will be coming up on Friday, the 24th. So you've got a couple of weeks there. Please aim to complete these by the 23rd, so just a day before that training. And again, you'll find all of these homework assignments in Moodle in the Assignments 2 block. There's also an open discussion board that you'll see there in that block. It's not connected with any of the assignments themselves. It's really just an open discussion for you to have a space for discussion and sharing as a clinic cohort. So yeah, we will move along from there. And Maria has posted a link to that homework assignment for you. And let's continue on. Oop, I skipped 2 slides. Let's talk logistics for a moment. You may be wondering, okay, so how do I access that community of practice portal, that Moodle that we're talking about? How do I download the webinar slides and access the recordings? Some of you have asked about that in our chat today. Where do I get access to additional resources? How do I keep track of the assignments? And so the link to the Moodle is there again, of course, and then you received your login information for that in an email last Friday. So hopefully if you haven't had a chance to make your way in yet, you can just check for that again. And if you do have any questions about it at all, please don't hesitate to contact us. I'm going to show you just a screenshot rather than navigating over there, but everything will be accessible right through that one-stop shopping center of your Moodle. If you've ever participated in another CalPro community of practice or an online course, this will be familiar to you, but if not, again, please don't hesitate to contact me and I'm happy to support you in that. We sent an email about this with your information. There's also a checklist that will be there in Moodle that Maria is posting for us now that will help you just keep track of all your assignments as we make our way through the months of our clinic time together. All the due dates will be there, etc. Oh, you know what? Before I leave that slide, I do want to point out, you see Amy and Sudi here on your screen and also on your Zoom. But I just wanted to note, you see a few little green, circles. One is marked as collapse all. I don't want you to collapse. It's not collapse all of us, but just the way that the Moodle is set up, you can expand or collapse each of these blocks. And so you can collapse all of them, expand all of them, or do them one at a time using those little arrows over on the side. I mention that because it's often easiest to prevent the scroll of doom, just to collapse all of them and then open the one that corresponds to the week that we're on. So you might already have assignment 1 opened. Maybe you can go down to assignments 2, which is what you see there at the bottom of the screenshot. Okay, just a little visual orientation. All right, so you see here again our calendar for our clinic time. Amy reviewed this with us earlier, and so we just have those dates up there for you one more time as we wrap up our time together for today. We will see you next at our virtual session on October 24th. That one is, we call it a full day session. It's a 5-hour session. Please do remember to bring all your homework assignments that we've mentioned during this time. And then you can, again, use that Moodle checklist to help you stay organized and stay on track. And with that, we will just thank you again for today and thank you in advance for your investment of your time and energy in IET Clinic. We are so looking forward to working with you over the months that we have ahead and as you work with your teams to plan and implement these powerful programs. So with that, best wishes for the rest of your day, and we will see you again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye.